just so that you all know, the agenda, or you've seen it, if you've seen the agenda, you know that this is not the way this program was supposed to go tonight. But one of the things I think that we're really good as Pacific Islanders is being flexible and going with the flow. And I think that it went the way it was supposed to go. Sorry. We just always get nervous planning these events because we don't know how they're going to go. And even though we plan and plan and plan, something always happens, and then, you know, we have to adjust. And I think that has been one of the themes across this, you know, conversation. The three things or concepts that I take from this is collective, the importance of a collective, reciprocity, and then voice, that it's time that we stop settling, even with our culture of humility. It's time for us to come together and really be the change that we want to see in our communities. And I know for a fact that everyone on this call and anyone else that's going to watch this broadcast or film after this is going to connect to the stories somehow that have been shared in so many ways. And so I'm so grateful, one, to have you all here so that you can go and tell these stories. The purpose of this Women's Summit is to bring to life these untold stories that we don't hear of the people who have contributed to the progress of our people, but don't necessarily get recognized enough. And so thank you so much, Malissa, to Kumuhina, to Leone, and especially to Susie, because this is something that I've always wanted to do back home. I would ask myself every time I went to a conference, why are we not up there? Why are we always bringing other people to come in and speak to us when we have so much knowledge and wisdom to share of our own? And I wanted to create a place where we could do that, where we could hear the stories of the people we know that really have made a difference in our lives and have impacted us so much that we are in a place, like Melissa shared, to be that voice for our community. And so I can't even say how grateful I am to be a part of all of this. I want to make sure that we answer questions in the chat, and I saved this question for the end because this is really important. The reason why we do this is for our youth, for our future generation and generations. And so I'd like to put this out there. This is a question from Sincera. What advice can you give to us who work in our community, specifically with our youth and young adult population? How can we foster the importance of knowing our culture and history when they don't see a significance or weren't raised in that space? I put this out for our speakers, but also to others who would like to share something on that, because this is a question we get asked all the time.
Can I share?
Yes, Dominic.
I'll take my time to comment, kind of ask a question to Melissa, and then just share my mana'o anyways. So and no particular order, because everyone was saying stuff and all my thoughts were going down on my little post-it notes. But first, I love the Hokulea and Papa Mau story. And somebody had asked Papa Mau, what's the difference between a Micronesian and a Polynesian? And he said, there's no difference. Just the fact that somebody broke the bridge and we have to rebuild that bridge to connect to each other. And so Reta, you just barely said something tonight about connecting, and we've all used that tonight as well in connecting with each other. And Melissa, you said something about, I guess, being diverse in our communities. Because me, I like to stay in my little bubble. I like to stay in my little bubble of Hawaiians and then maybe go spread out a little bit to our Pacifica. And that's all I want to look at, because those are the only people who are going to understand me. But I have to teach myself what I taught myself is that, or what I teach is that we need to be educated and to share and to share and to share and tell our stories. So with that question, Retta, that you just asked is, for me, with our high schools, with our youth, a few schools, maybe around 10 or 11 in Utah, throughout all the districts, they have a program called People of the Pacific. And I like to, if somebody asks me, what is that, People of the Pacific? What is that class? And I like to define it really quickly as a Pacific Island study / college prep / leadership / Pacific Island history class. And so the way I teach, or I felt that have connected me with the youth, is just talking story with them. Sometimes we go in and we want to teach with that, with, certain pedagogies. But for me, I'm an auntie, first and foremost. I always introduce myself, and coming from Hawaii, that's what we coin everybody that we are connected to, is auntie, uncle. I found out that not so much in the mainland, but that's how I was raised. And I thought that's how all Pacific Islanders addressed each other, but apparently not. So something that I learned moving up here to Utah. But it lets them feel, even the Palangi kids that happen to be in the class, when I connect to them and I tell them that, hey, I'm auntie, so you can just talk story with me. Don't need to tell me all your guys' life stories. But, just connecting with them and turning it into a story has been effective for me. And I actually sometimes have them repeat it back to me. Not in the form of memorization, just kind of, a long time ago, when I tell the story, it's like a long time ago, da, 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 da. And so, I just make the youth just kind of repeat it back. So teach and have repeat. And that's how babies learn, coming from an immersion background, is just the repetition of it all and telling the same story and then adding on to the story here and there. So that was one way that I connect with the youth while I'm up here in Utah. And then Malissa, when you were talking about your dad painting, I just started to type in the chat. I was like, oh, that's a form of kapu aloha. And then you said you were mad at your dad. I was like, oh, maybe not. So I thought when you first started talking about that part of your story, I was like, that's a cool example of kapu aloha. But you did mention it here at the ending about your father's humility. And so maybe in all his wisdom, because at first I thought you were going the way I thought you were going, and then I realized, oh no, she's mad. So maybe my example of kapu aloha is not going to work here. But I don't know now that you're an adult, in hindsight, maybe, sometimes we hate to admit that our parents were right, and the whys that we always ask them, and now the whys that our kids always ask us. Maybe at the time your father knew from his own experiences and for the safety of his own children, because he knew Malissa was ready to go out there and knock out somebody and get into trouble. But maybe by being that way, and there is, to me, sometimes there's just strength in that. Situations could be different, but that's how I first interpreted the story when you started it off. I was like, wow, instead of turning around and wanting to fussy everybody, your dad was just humble and just, showed his kids that maybe it's not worth it to I don't know, I can't even think of the word. Reconcile, that's not the word I'm looking for, but you know what I mean. Maybe he knew, but of course I myself get all riled up. I do get mad when I look at that sign, Aloha Orthodontics, because it's on my way to work and I get mad all the time. But you know, the humility that it took for your father to and the Latino uncle at the same time to do that. Who knows if it was fear or if it was wisdom that he did that. And then I also wanted to say your video, you know, I feel like I need to make my own video now too. But it kind of made me think of something that my auntie taught me, because the Fa'asamoa way. And I was kind of complaining to my auntie. I was like, yeah, my mom, she found my check because I wrote out a check to my father-in-law, and it was my wedding night. And I had to write a check to my father-in-law for whatever. And my husband grew up Fa'asamoa. Like I said, I grew up as a local Hawaiian, but my auntie reminded me that just like your father, when you give and take like that, the rewards at the end, you see the community coming together. And she used the example of when her daughter got married, that because of that part, the good of our culture, that particular lesson or way of life, we always complain, you know, all the money we have to give away. But then when we are the recipient, we are grateful for that. And so this is just everything I wanted to tag on to everything that was shared tonight. And after Oreta shared her little bit at the ending too. So I don't think there was a question in there, or maybe my question, Malissa, was, you know, as an adult now, in hindsight, with what your father did in painting over that and not turning around and fussing somebody. I don't know, what do you think now that you're the adult?
That's a really good question. And I think you're right. I think there's a lot of truth in what you said. There is a lot. My father was way more smarter than me, because my father's self-control at that age will it was paramount to him. And I know that my dad did that because he wanted to show my brother and I that there are different ways to addressing conflict, instead of like fighting. So, you know, let's not get it twisted. My dad's a boxer. My dad was a really interesting guy, a convert to the church. So, you know, my dad had his time. But I think in that moment, with his experience and with his faith, my dad felt that at that moment, the best thing for him to do was to show my brother and I that yes, we can result to violence, but what is that going to do? How is that going to help the situation? It was a teachable moment for me. And now that I look back at it, I'm still mad. I'm not gonna lie, I'm still mad. I didn't wish harm because we didn't even know who did it. Nobody, you know, we never found out. We never filed a report. But I felt like as he was erasing those things, that he was erasing the incident, that he was erasing the fact that it happened. And I think for me, that was the hardest thing. Was that. But, you know, I absolutely trust my father with everything. He was a great man. And so when he did that, that shows extreme discipline, because my brother did the exact opposite. You know what I'm saying? So I absolutely, in hindsight, my dad made the right decision at the time. But to Sincere's question, you know, it's hard working with young people. I want to be violent, actually, every time I work with some young people who want to act up and whatnot. But what we've learned is is a different modality around communicating culture and identity, right? We can't force feed our kids. What's happening is that we force our young people to participate in traditional practices, but nobody's explaining it. So when you don't explain it, it's more of a burden and a task than it is a social and traditional practice. So when you take some time to explain, hey, this is why we take a challah to a funeral. Hey, this is why this woman sits at has her own table, her own servant, and her own food because of the role that she plays as a matriarch of the family. We just assume our kids know because they've done it and they've seen us do it. But when you help unpack it for young people, they think it's the coolest thing. They're like, what? That's what we do? Oh, now I get it. So that's just my little 2 cents is if we explain what we're doing to the young people in a way that resonates or lands easier for them and not forceful. I remember as a kid, like my cousins used to get hella beat because they didn't do it right. You didn't fold the fala right, ha ha ha. You know what I mean? So there was a lot of that, but nobody, after you got beat up, nobody said the reason why you fold it like this is because when you present it, it needs, so the way that we teach our young people, we have to be adaptable. We're not in the island, we're in the diaspora. And so we need to be adaptable. We need to sometimes speak their language. We need to be able to relate to our young people who are also dealing with a multitude of challenges themselves. They haven't fully developed. They don't know who they are as an identity. And all we can do is to help influence it. And so I would just say to Sincera, sis, just with a lot of love, a lot of patience, and to walk them through it. Not talk them through it, but walk them through it. I've seen that in our work has been the most successful is when we're not yelling at our kids and telling them this is what you should do, but teaching them. And if they don't take it, that's fine. Then you do it again and you do it again. And what happens is you start to see that they change. There's a transformation that happens to a young person who was born in the diaspora when they really figure out who their identity is. And so it's a really beautiful thing when you see that transformation happen. But we have to be patient because I know I was a horrible child. I know that for sure. So it's a lot of patience and a lot of prayer. Continue to pray for your children.
Go ahead, Paul.
One of the things, this is a beautiful discussion, by the way, and you know, I had to turn my camera off because I got me in my fields. So all of a sudden, I think I have pollination or something. My eyes were just, I don't know what was going on. But one of the things that I have found that has worked for me in the last, and this just recently happened. This isn't something that, you know, I learned. It became an aha moment when dealing with my own nephews and their kids. And the fact that my nephews have kids now is kind of scary to me. But they would always pull me aside and say, "Uncle, can you tell them the story you told me about this?" I'm like, "Why don't you tell them?" Because it sounds better when it comes from your mouth. And I said, "Either you're being lazy or you forgot it." They said, "Well, it's both. So can you start it over again?" So I agree 100% that we have to be patient. But this is one thing that I've twisted, Sincera, and this is something that you can use. I tell kids that if your parents tell you to do something, first and foremost, do it at that time. If you don't understand why you're doing it, when everything is calmed down, walk back and say, "Mom, why did you ask me to do that? Can you explain it to me?" Your parents will be glad to explain and share the tradition and the culture and their stories if they know that you're actually interested, but not with attitude. You've got to ask it seriously. And I realized that one of my magic powers is the fact that first I was born in Tonga, raised here, went back to Tonga. So I first 7 years raised here, next 7 years raised in Tonga. So I learned, so I'm kind of like, a product of both worlds, that I can balance it and understand both. So what I started about 6 weeks ago, when I this Clubhouse thing keeps popping up, is every Sunday at 3 p.m. I have a 1 hour Clubhouse where I just go in and I just try to attack things that are on their levels. What I'm using is topics that my cousins or my nephews ask me to do, and that's what I approach. It's exactly 1 hour. I go in, I drop the seed, plant the seed, and then I wait for them to reply. Something that I started 6 weeks ago, I'm now finally getting questions on 6 weeks later. When people finally realize, oh, he was serious. You could actually write him. He actually said he would follow us back. Because for some reason, there's a divide between our youth where they think that we're unapproachable because A, we're too old, and B, we're too smart. What they don't understand is, no, we are approachable if you're being serious. We're not approachable if you're going to come up with that attitude, oh, there's that Tongan thing again. We got to go do that Tongan thing again. Why has it got to be a Tongan thing? Or why does it got to be a cultural thing? Why can't it be because that is what makes us people vibrate at a vibration that is so beautiful that we all feel that mana? So what I would sincerely do, and this is the other thing that I tell, that I in my work in the last 6 weeks with the youth, is telling them, look, if you're so fortunate enough to know more, your parents sacrificed so you could go to school and you could speak English, you could learn the language, it is now on your shoulders to go back and teach them. Because this came up with a kid who said, can you help me fill out my scholarship form? My dad won't do it. I said, your dad won't do it, or you didn't explain to your dad how to do it? He's too stupid anyway. And I had to stop him. I said, hold on. You're talking about the same man who put clothes on your food, put clothes on your back, food in your mouth for the last 17 years. And now you're going to call him stupid? No, it doesn't work that way. And it took me to frame it in the same, that this youth today, everything is a microwave. It's a microwave society for them. If it doesn't fit in 60 seconds, they don't want to know about it. If it's not in 140 characters for a tweet, they don't want to listen to it. If it doesn't fit in their status update, they don't want to know about it. It's become so quick and so rapid that all of us have said here, sometimes we got to take a breath, grab them by the hand, sit them down, slow them down, and just act and talk to them. But I think the biggest problem, Sincera, with today's youth in America is that they feel invisible, that we don't see them, that we only see them to do our bu'i, that we only see them to do what we need done, and we're using them to do the things that we don't want to do. That's almost like the feeling I get from these youth. And it's sad that it's come to that, but somewhere along the way, we can mend these bridges by having these open dialogues, simply by starting that little. How long was your movie, Malissa? 6 minutes? 3 minutes?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. See, that's when you go back and you say, hey, you know what we're going to do next week as a family? We're all going to shoot our own 3-minute movie and tell our story of our family in this neighborhood. Start there. You know what? All you nephews and nieces that love doing all these little selfies and TikToks, we're going to make 1 3-minute TikTok. That's what we're going to do. And we're going to tell our story. And then I want you guys, and you'll be surprised how creative they all of a sudden become when they realize, like, ooh, he got the camera on. Hold on, get my good side, uncle. Get my good side. But this is how we bring them in. We also have to be mindful. I saw Leone saying that, you're also learning. Yeah, we all have, it's a constant learning wheel. We have to we've just got to be conscious of knowing that this is our future. If we don't take care of them now, we're not going to have a future.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Paul. Again, goes back again, right, to that connection. I think for our youth especially, and as he talks about this need for instant gratification for our youth nowadays, what the truth is, in my work I found, is that they do want the guidance. They do love to hear the stories. They do want to know about their culture, because a lot of the things that we know in our work is that they suffer from this identity issues of trying to belong, being American and Samoan or Polynesian or whatever. And so it's important that we continue to, like Paul said, share our stories, continue to, like Malissa said, explain the meanings behind the practice. I wish somebody would write a paper about those assumptions, Melissa, because when we were creating this curriculum for Pacific Island violence prevention, we talked about those assumptions and, you know, the misunderstanding of our cultural practices in this generation, because they don't understand that, has caused a lot of like resentment towards what we do, how we practice, who we are. And really, if they learn the meanings behind them, they will understand and get connected to why we do this. And like someone made that connection with, or in your video, when people staying at your house, doing falave-laves and taking gifts to other people, when they understand why and they see that reciprocity being paid back to them in their time of need, that's when, to me, our kids really get it. And my kids have been fortunate to see that, because my community is very strong in that when we have funerals and weddings and all of that, that they see that it's not about the money or the material things, it's about the act and the principle behind that action that they learn from. And so I'm so grateful to be able to have this kind of open conversation with them, and have found that to be the most useful as we're developing these materials to address our communities about how to have these conversations. Because again, like you all have mentioned, we come from different generations of communication. Our parents did the best that they could with the materials and the tools that they had. And now it's up to our generation and the next generation to carry on with the tools that have been effective for us, and leave all the stuff we don't like and the stuff that didn't serve us well, you know, behind. That's the only way I feel like we're going to move forward. And so I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, because it leads me to talk about the resources. What resources are out there? I'm glad that Tile brought that up, because especially with PICTAR, we've been trying to develop materials that relate to our community. We don't want to reinvent wheels, and we want to use things that are already in place that that can help us. And one of the tools we used was families talking together. This curriculum that we use to talk to parents. How do you talk to your kids about sex, about these hard topics that they don't know how to talk about? And we found that we could use that model to talk about all these other things, like, you know, racism, inequities, all of that stuff. And we found it so useful to have these conversations, because we have it with both parents and with their youth. And when we brought them together in a lot of the programs that we did, and talking about suicide especially, we were so amazed at just the gaps of communication that these families had. And these are pretty strong families. And when we sat down and they could say to each other, I'm struggling, and the parent saying, you know, let me help you. How are you struggling? What can I do to help you? Just having that simple conversation for that youth in that activity was so powerful that parents had reported back that they were able to talk about so much more that they didn't know about their youth, and their youth didn't know about their parents. They had gone through, you know, contemplating suicide because of their own struggles with their own parents. That connection is so important, and we've lost that because we're so busy getting caught up in this world and all that's going on. And so, you know, rarely do we have these kinds of conversations like this, even in a conference, that we can just talk. And that's why I love this model that we have in our culture of Talk Story. It really has been effective in the work that I've done with our youth and with other youth here in Utah. And so, I mean, that's just my share about where we are. It's been awesome, guys, but I know you guys are all tired. So I just want to again say thank you to all of you for all of the work that you're doing. Just remember, we need you all. We all need to come together to make sure that our people are heard, and make sure that the work that's being done on every level, community, you know, state and government levels, we need that work to be done and our voices to be heard on all levels, so that we can make the impact that we want to for our future generations. Susie, I wanted to just give you, I know this is on the spot, but because, you are responsible for this, I wanted to give you some last words if you would like to share before we close out this night, just about everything that is going on in the conference and why you even do this work.
Sorry, something's wrong with my computer and you can't see me. I don't know, John and I were sitting back here trying to figure it out. But thank you for the time. I'm just impressed, amazed, grateful, honored. There's so many words that come to my mind on what an amazing day it's been. And when we gather, our mana is so strong. And I think we've seen that in all day today. I love what Malissa said was when that we have responsibility. And I keep thinking about what she's saying is when you have the responsibility to share with our community and connect resources outside of our community because our community lacks those resources. And so everybody here on this call, I appreciate it. I apologize that I'm not good with words, but thank you so much for participating. I look forward to tomorrow and keep doing what we're doing. Thank you.
With that, we will close out our night. Lava for attending and have a good week. See you guys tomorrow.